Now, meet the real men behind the mayhem.
The heroes in the movies are their special effects.
The special effects are probably some of the best still in the business.
The special effects are so fabulous.
The first special effects hero of the James Bond films is John Stears.
When the Bonds came along, I was asked by Frank George if I'd go in and help him with the miniatures on the bauxite wharf for Dr. No.
With a budget of only £1,000, Stears destroys Dr. No's fortress.
And then the second Bond film, John took over as the supervisor.
That was my first job on the Bond as supervisor.
Stears and his team manufacture Q's lethal briefcase.
Inside, a tear gas cartridge.
Which is a smoking success. The film features more than lethal gadgets.
The helicopter you saw was a miniature. That's the first time a model helicopter has been used like that.
For Goldfinger, some eye-popping special effects are required.
On Goldfinger, we did the optical shot of the reflection in the girl's eye of the guy that's coming up behind James Bond.
Among the film's other dazzling effects is the sexiest, most lethal car ever built.
Whatever you do, don't touch it.
Now, why not?
Because you'll release this section of the roof.
First thing I was going to do is to make the hole for the ejector seat.
Ejector seat? You're joking.
I never joke about my work, 007.
I said, nobody else can do this, guys. I'm going to do this.
To install Q's gadgets, Stears must first cut apart the irreplaceable, hand-built Aston Martin DB5.
I looked at it, went away and had a cup of coffee, came back and got the drill and drilled the hole, and that was it, started.
Stears outfits the vehicle with a compressed air canister to fire a dummy out of the car. Acetylene oxygen torches simulate front-firing machine guns. The oil slick is created for real, but the tank for the effect is so large it must be removed before the bulletproof shield can be installed. With a genuine smokescreen, revolving number plates, built-in homing device complete with tracking screen and tyre shredding hubcaps, the Aston Martin goes down in history. To create the effect of Oddjob's deadly hat, Stears uses a number of tricks.
That was on a wire, which you couldn't see. The actual hat rotated on that wire as it went, so it spun. And then the wire was placed very close to the neck of the statue. As it just touched the statue, we had an electrical device, so simultaneously the neck was pulled away. What we did there, actually, we did that in reverse, so it's stuck in the bars and then we pulled it off.
For Thunderball, John Stears creates effects for land, sea, air, and even underwater. His groundbreaking work includes one of the largest explosions ever filmed and earns him an Academy Award for Best Special Effects.
Didn't even know I was in for an Oscar. In fact, a friend of mine called me from Wisconsin and said, "You just won an Oscar." So I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "What for?" So it's for Thunderball.
The next James Bond adventure requires special effects that are literally out of this world.
All that stuff was shot in the main separately. The world was shot separately, the spacecraft was shot separately, the man was shot separately against Black Velvet on the stage by Freddie Young. And then we brought it all back here and did all the optical compositions and all the rocket where it turns over to make its ascent into the mouth of the volcano was all model stuff that we shot, that John Stears had the rockets built.
But the real star of the show is the autogyro Little Nelly.
I put the air-to-air missiles on it. I think it had about 24 rockets. It had the machine guns and had the two big sidewinders on it. All worked, all had to fire.
Bond films customarily end with the villain's lair being blown to bits. But when the actual location is a real mountaintop restaurant and can't be demolished, model-making skills come to the rescue.
We did have to demolish the lair where the villain was, which is the Schilthorn barn above Muren. That's 12,000 feet up in the Alps. When I came back to Pinewood, I built a miniature of the whole thing and destroyed the miniature.
Stears is absent from the next James Bond film, Diamonds Are Forever. Shot largely in America, it employs the talents of Leslie Hillman and Whitney McMahon, with visual effects by Wally Beavers and the legendary Albert Whitlock. When Stears is unavailable for Live and Let Die, Derek Meddings joins the Bond family.
The thing which actually gave me a footing in the Bond films was that at the end of the picture there was a sequence when the poppy fields explode, and Guy Hamilton called me over and he said, "Could you do this as a miniature?" back at the studios, and I said, yes, I could. And he said, and it'll look good, and I said, yeah, of course it will, it'll look great. We came back to England, and I did the miniatures, and that really started it.
The film's climax calls for Meddings to create the most unusual villain's demise of the series.
We had a figure of Yaphet Kotto, and we had to inflate him. And of course, it was on a wire, so it would go up to the rafters. And there was a charge attached to the back of his body, you know, away from camera.
Where's Kananga?
Well, he always did have an inflated opinion of himself.
On The Man with the Golden Gun, John Stears returns, working with Derek Meddings and Cliff Cully to make cars fly and clouds move on their command.
Clouds don't cooperate too well for filmmaking, so that was all the effects stuff.
As usual, the film ends with a bang.
The island blowing up we did on the back lot at Pinewood, and I always thought that was a really good shot.
Meddings has his hands full creating models for The Spy Who Loved Me.
The problem with the supertanker was because it had to swallow the submarines, there couldn't be anything underneath. So I had it built like a catamaran, so that when the doors open, we can actually drive it over the submarine.
Derek Meddings builds a mammoth floating palace, which doubles as the villain's lair, Atlantis. The models created by Meddings for The Spy Who Loved Me fool even experts. But not all the effects can be done in miniature.
I was supposed to be standing behind the chair, and I said I think there'd be much more tension in it if I'm sitting in the chair. I just didn't have time to get out of it, and it blew. I had 3 holes there where most people have 1.
Moonraker takes 007 into outer space, and with NASA's real space shuttle yet to be launched, the filmmakers cannot rely on stock footage.
The shuttle liftoff scenes were largely achieved by a series of photographic transparencies laid up in the foreground, and the model would have a great big firework in its backside.
I had these magnesium flares made up. I mean, once they're alight, there's no way you can put them out.
The separation of the booster rockets was achieved by having the 3 parts on a wire.
It was travelling on a trolley, and when it got to a certain distance from the camera, we had a little electrical sort of contact that actually swung the pods away from the actual shuttle itself.
Effects cameraman Robin Brown faces a challenge with the screens inside Drax's control complex.
We had images which we back projected into the screens. One of the problems was the set itself required a certain element of lighting, a certain intensity. Some of the screens were flat to camera, but some were angled. And I do remember we had to take some of the footage and treat it and distort it so that when it was projected up on the screen, the perspective came back, at the right angle.
The film's earthbound pyrotechnics are handled by John Evans and John Richardson.
I think we got about as close as you can get and still retain the safety angle.
The outstanding and innovative special effects work of Moonraker earns the film an Academy Award nomination. The next 007 adventure, For Your Eyes Only, was less of a fantasy, but still featured fantastic effects. The film opens with some impossible helicopter stunts. Impossible for anyone but the Bond effects crew. Using foreground miniatures, Derek Meddings creates the illusion of a helicopter flying through a building. To sell the effect, Meddings uses an air hose to blow up dust on the miniature. Special effects technician Chris Corbould works to mount a real helicopter inside the location.
And we had to build quite a major rig with a full-size helicopter on the end with rotors going round, which we mounted on a track going up the inside of the building.
For Your Eyes Only also requires underwater model work.
That was done on the tank at Pinewood. It was a very large model, I think about 5th scale.
There was a sequence with the bathyscaphe. We had that on wires, and then little tiny figures of Bond and the girl. When they came out of the trawler, the figures of Bond and the girl were about that tall. And they were on wires operated from above out of the water, and we blew the diver with air and flashbulbs.
Bond is back in Octopussy, and so is effects man John Richardson, adding to the pre-credits fun.
It had every type of effect you can imagine, built into this little moment.
The sequence features a full-size Acrostar jet, a miniature jet, foreground miniatures, a full-size model mounted on a Jaguar, and one of the greatest miniature explosions ever filmed.
It all worked out well in the end.
Richardson's work in A View to a Kill takes him to new heights.
The airship for A View to a Kill gave us quite a number of problems. We built a 40-foot long one, which we could fill with helium.
The final scene requires Richardson to recreate one of the world's great landmarks in miniature on the Pinewood Studios backlot. The film also finds Richardson working with water.
Once we got into the flooding, we had a full-size set that we flooded with tip tanks and hoses, and we had submersible pumps feeding vast water sprays that would create a look of a wall of water coming straight at you, but in fact it was all spray. And then we bolstered this up with I think it was a third-scale miniature of the same set that, of course, we could flood much quicker.
The Living Daylights pre-credits employs remote control effects work.
We fired the Land Rover off with an air cannon and had a radio-controlled rig inside it to release a parachute to pull a dummy out of the top of the Land Rover, and then we blew it up with a radio signal.
A good effects man has to know more than how to blow up a Range Rover. He also has to know how to boil water.
It's a pot of cold water with a ring built into the bottom of the pot which made smoke, but when you throw the pot of water, although it looks as though it's steaming and hot, it's actually quite cold.
The film also features the return of a gadget-laden Aston Martin. John Richardson and his crew create enough special effects wizardry to make Q proud. Although The Living Daylights has an amazing amount of pyrotechnics, nothing matches the explosions in License to Kill.
To this day, they're still some of the biggest explosions I've ever done. You know, because to create a 4,000-gallon petrol tanker blowing up, I mean, you obviously had to create something pretty immense. We were using so much explosive that we were worried about creating rock falls.
You can actually sort of choreograph the explosion and the directions that the flame goes in. Making an interesting explosion is one where you have things continually going over a period of time rather than just one bang.
GoldenEye marks the triumphant debut of Pierce Brosnan as 007.
You destroy every vehicle you get into.
Standard operating procedure.
And marks the last James Bond assignment for miniature effects wizard Derek Meddings.
Each Bond film that I've been involved in, they've had more and more miniatures, and this one has had, I think, the most amount of miniatures that I've ever done on any film in my life, which I thoroughly enjoy. You cut from one miniature shot to another miniature shot. You know, it's a whole sequence. I mean, it sounds very big-headed, and I suppose I shouldn't say it, but I think that what we've done with miniatures, people are not going to know that they're looking at miniatures. And that is what I've tried to achieve all my sort of working life.
After a lifetime in the film industry, Derek Meddings passes away shortly after completing his work on GoldenEye.
He was a great enthusiast, and I think he was in love with film.
He was a brilliant fella to work with.
He was happiest when he was working.
We were nominated for a BAFTA award for GoldenEye. And it would have been nice to have sat at that table with him.
In 1999, pioneering effects man John Stears, who is responsible for much of the magic in the early Bond films, passes away.
We went far and above what was the norm for effects in those days. And we sort of set the genre for effects. Bonds, to me, were probably the highlight of my career.
But John Richardson, Chris Corbould, Paul Wilson and others continue the tradition.
We did some great stuff, blowing over vehicles with a jet, firing rockets at cars coming towards us, ammo trucks. You just kept building it up and building it up.
What made the Bonds the Bonds? They've always been a little over the top.
Thanks to special effects geniuses like John Stears, Derek Meddings, Chris Corbould and John Richardson, when James Bond goes over the top, he's gone in the best of style.
Nobody does it better.